right. Thanks, Deb, and thanks, Michelle. I want to appreciate Deb and Michelle especially, but also the whole community for creating these classes. You just thought it up, you invented it, you've made it happen, and it's inviting people from all over the world. And it's really been wonderful, especially during the pandemic when we haven't been able to meet in person. So much appreciation to you two. I was giving a lot of thought to what would be a good start to the new year. And one of the things I wanted to share with you, some of you know this, but many of you don't, which is that one of our companies is called Third Pig Unlimited. And the tagline for Third Pig is building your dreams on a solid foundation. And it comes from hearing about Gay's experience growing up, and especially growing up with his grandmother, who always read him the Three Little Pigs. And he took that to heart and has always created from a sense of a strong foundation. And that's where your dreams can really can come to life, is being built not on sand, but on a solid foundation. And so I invite you to look at what we're going to be exploring tonight as one of the foundational pillars of creating the life that you want. And I decided to start with responsibility because I think responsibility is the issue that humans need to handle if we're going to continue to be here on the planet. And I've been assessing how well we've been doing for myself. And I want to just give you a couple of reference points for how well we're doing with responsibility. So about 25 years ago, we were studying this issue of just simply people doing what they say they're going to do. Do you do what you say you're going to do? And do you not do what you say you're not going to do? And from our various studies and looking at research, we determined back then that about 3% of people actually reliably did what they said they were going to do. So have we made any progress since then? Well, I was looking, I saw this little blurb going by on social media every day about, I think it was something like 1 billion masks have ended up in the ocean. So the whole issue of littering, if human beings litter, you know, when I go down the street and I see litter, I just wonder, are people actually aware that they're connected to other species and to the planet and to the oceans? So what I come up with is no, people are not aware of that. So there's a huge amount of unconsciousness. And if you also just think about littering in general, when we had a little respite from the pandemic and the parks opened up, what we saw was littering. And for me, that it just, I mean, it made me very sad. You know, I've sort of gone beyond being angry about it, and I felt really sad and a sense of, well, you know, this is the issue that we need to handle, which is actually being able to responding to our lives as a part of life, not separate from life. And so I want to share with you as much as I can about what I've discovered and what I want to assist you in discovering about genuinely responding to life and being able to move from reacting to responding. So one of the things I want to say right off is that you cannot respond if you're reacting. Those two exist in two separate worlds. So there's been so much reactivity lately. I was just thinking again that this whole last week has been a very long year. And this whole sense of time shrinking and expanding, and the sense of disconnection, that if you're reacting, you're not using your whole brain. So one thing I'm not going to go into in great detail tonight, but I want you to have as a given, if you're reacting, you're in fear. Reacting comes from your fear brain, and that can either be fight, you're not going to tell me I can't wear a mask, or it can be flee. Well, I'll just go to New Zealand, but I can't go to New Zealand, but I'll go somewhere where, I won't stay here. Or you just freeze, or you've just fainted with overwhelm. But if you're reacting, you cannot respond. So just take a little review for yourself. In fact, go into your favorite fear response posture and exaggerate it a little bit. Mine is sort of a freeze wrapped around with fight. It's kind of a whoa, and it's what I call the grip. So I'd like you to go into an exaggeration of your fear response, just so you kind of invite it in. Yeah, beautiful, beautiful. And take a look around so you can go, oh yeah, I know that one. Oh, that one looks familiar. Oh, I'm not the only one who's reacting. And then I'd like you to just do a couple of minutes of fear melters. I'm going to continue talking to you, but I'd like you to do fear melters while you're listening. So when in doubt, do fear melters, because fear melters will move you into presence. And from presence, you're actually able to respond. So my favorite, my fallback is always wiggling. And sometimes I do wiggling by bouncing. So if any of you haven't tried bouncing wiggling, that's a really great one, because it really grounds you and it gives you a sense of, oh, I'm attached to something. I'm not just floating off into space. So at any time during this hour, so love scoops, let's just love scoop and love our reactivity. And love the overwhelm, and give yourself some showers of love and little spritzers of love wherever you need it. And just draw that up and give yourself a little hug. So just 2 minutes of fear melters will shift you from reactivity to presence, where you have some other possibilities. So at any time, I will not be offended. In fact, I will probably give you extra approval if I see you doing fear melters, if that is any kind of motivator for you. So the two favorite ways of reacting instead of responding, because I actually think of responsibility as that I'm able to respond. I can respond. So if I'm reacting, I'm doing same old, that keeps the same old us versus them going. And I can do that in my head. I can do that with my body. I can do that relationally. But the two misunderstandings about responsibility that are most common is, okay, I'll take responsibility. So go ahead and take on responsibility as a burden for a moment. All right. I'll do that again. It's not my turn, but I will, because it's my responsibility. So you might have grown up in that kind of, that was certainly the attitude that my father took. He was behind his newspapers, and whenever somebody would ask him something, he would respond by rattling his newspapers or sighing or making sort of mouth noises that let me know that it was a burden. But I think the one that is more common than that is responsibility as blame. And that's become so epidemic that I think people think when someone says, who's responsible for this? When you just even hear that, what happens in your body? If I say, okay, who's responsible for this? And even if I say it with some tonality, like, all right, who's responsible for this? Yeah, so yeah, I'm seeing Darlene going, duh. Yeah, so what I learned as a kid, when my mother would say, okay, who's responsible? It was, uh-oh, and everybody would go either like this or would run. They'd make a flee move, or they'd say, I didn't do it, she did it. And that misunderstanding of responsibility just keeps our disconnection going. So notice which of those, or both, but you probably tend to prefer one of them, and you probably grew up with more one than the other. I certainly grew up with the blame from my mother and burden from my dad. So, I'm well expanded in both of those responses. So what would be the opposite of blame? Just consider that for a moment. Let your body consider that. What would be a whole different gateway than blame? And what we have found, because we've been exploring responsibility, I can remember conversations about responsibility in 1981. So that's how long Gay and I have been having conversations about responsibility. And one of the things that I learned was that blame is an aspect of fear. So blame goes with fight. And when I shift to wonder, I have a possibility of being able to respond. Because at its heart, responsibility is being able to grok the connections between things. So I said that I was going to meet you for lunch at 1, and I totally spaced it out and didn't do that. And I had an incomplete communication with you that I didn't finish. There was a thing that happened last week that I was angry about, and I just sort of forgot about it. And then I forgot about our appointment. Oh, those two things are connected. So being able to look at what I'm doing, what the result of what I'm doing, and what I could learn from that. That's in the heart of responsibility. So I'm going to stand up and say that again, and I'd love to have you just go ahead and respond, letting your body respond with, so instead of blame, I open to wonder. So it's that whole curiosity thing, that intention that Deb was talking about. So when I'm in blame, I get kind of linear and compressed. But when I'm in wonder, I get more dimensional. My breathing expands. I actually create, and we use the as a way of creating wonder, of shifting from critical brain to wonder brain. But you can do that by simply wondering, I wonder what that has to do with this. Or I wonder how I'm contributing to this. I wonder how what I'm doing has to do with what I'm seeing happening. Now, notice as I'm saying that there's no blame in there. So a sort of a faux wonder would be, I wonder how I screwed up again. Okay, or I wonder how I'm getting caught in this again. So I want you to notice the little tags that you put on to wonder of criticism of yourself, or, oh, there you go again. You're never going to learn. Because genuinely wonder, when I first got, I had an impulse to throw away those old glasses from my last relationship, drinking glasses. They were really beautiful, but I had the impulse to pass them on, and I didn't do that. And then I broke them, and Gay stepped on one of them and got a cut on his foot. And I went, whoa. That was one of the first times that I can remember, was just way back in the 80s, where I went, I wonder if there's a relationship between these glasses and me breaking them and Gay getting hurt. So what I got was that I had concealed my feeling about letting go of these glasses, and that I hadn't been really willing to let go of that old relationship because I still had a few goodies from it. And right after that, I remember going to the gym, and a necklace that this person had given me literally fell off my neck and onto the floor and broke into like a zillion pieces. So it said, okay, I'm going to just show you more about how to let go of things that are not connected anymore. And what I experienced when I was making those connections was, I wouldn't exactly call it joy, which is what I would call it now, but it was a burst of, it was a burst of sort of new possibilities, as if the world had gone 3 and 4 and 5 dimensional instead of just flat. So the usual interchange in responsibility is, okay, who's responsible? And then someone says, I guess I am, but it was really the team, the team didn't, they didn't give me the stuff in time. So when people are not getting excited about responsibility, it turns into what we call the triangle drama of the hero, villain, and victim. Okay, so I'm going to just pause for a moment, and I'm going to look at my list here, because I've now can check off blame and burden. One thing I wrote down earlier is that reacting prevents responding. That would be a good little tagline if you wanted to give yourself little cues around on your refrigerator, or particularly on your refrigerator, because that's one of the places where we don't connect what we put in our mouths with what shows up on our bodies. So if you're genuinely taking responsibility, you'll feel an expansion and a more sense of aliveness and vitality, however that occurs for you. And if you haven't, what I recommend is that you keep wondering, that you just keep, I wonder. One of the questions I like to use a lot, which has to do with responsibility, is I wonder what I could discover here, or I wonder what I could learn here. And that's been a key to all of our relationship work. And in fact, in the Conscious Heart, we call that the master commitment, which is committing to see every interaction as an opportunity for learning. So take a moment and write down, I see some of you write down or say to yourself, if you have something to write down, a recent hassle. Could be, with, in any sphere, but a place where you have a little bit of niggles going about it. And then I'd like you to write down under it. Those of you, notice if you're writing down a whole lot of detail, and then he said, and then I said, and then everybody got, and then, so that would let you know your amount of investment. But write down underneath that, what could I learn from this? What could I discover from this? And then I want to invite you to say that to yourself, say it inside and say it out loud. And I'd like you to combine that with some fear melters. So, I wonder what I could learn from this. Now, what we're doing with responsibility is opening the space for new connections. So when you're wondering about something like this, you're wondering what you can learn, the answer may come right away, but it may not. It may come when you're just going about your life. I get a lot of answers when I'm in the shower, brushing my teeth, or peeing. And I think they all have to do with flow. But if you've if you've genuinely wondered, then your life is going to start presenting you with these new connections. And for me, that is a great source of vitality, is to be wondering what I could learn from something, because I'm actually increasing my neural connections. I'm getting smarter. And one of the benefits of taking responsibility is that you do, in fact, get smarter, which I think is extremely cool. And you can keep getting smarter throughout life. You don't have to just accumulate a certain amount of neural synapses and then they start kind of going until you just fall over. you can keep expanding and getting smarter, getting more connected throughout your whole life. So just take a moment and say, would that be of any interest to me? Would I like to keep getting smarter throughout life? And the key to that is being willing to be a lifelong learner. It's what Carol Dweck would call a growth mindset, but I like to call it just being open to discovering, open to learning new things, but also opening to see new connections. That's where inventions come from. That's where new progress in science comes from. It doesn't come from just following a set of rules. It comes from wondering and being willing to create new connections. So taking responsibility doesn't always have to be, when people talk about taking responsibility, there's almost always a bad thing happened and I'm going to take responsibility for it. Like, okay, I did run over the trash can and it's now smashed. I did that. I take responsibility. But we don't take responsibility for, hey, I showed up on this call and all kinds of people had great questions and we all learned together. And I created that. So we don't take responsibility for what we would call the good stuff. So opening to learning can also be, how can I expand my ability to see the connections between things? How can I expand my ability to respond to life? And, I certainly, if I call somebody, if I'm calling any kind of a service agency, I want somebody who's able to respond to me. I don't want to have, and I can tell too, I'm sure you can too, by the tone, when people are just kind of going on and they're going on into their script and I can't even, get a word in there, I know that I'm not with someone who is able to respond. But if I ask somebody, is there anybody here who's responsible? They almost always get defensive. So what I now say is, there's someone who might be able to respond to my question. So I don't use the responsibility word at all because it has a lot of baggage for people. So the benefits and the possibilities of responsibility. When I take responsibility, I see on here that one of the things that we are learning this evening is radical self-trust. So radical, as you know or may not know, means at the root. At the root. So I'm going to stand again because I want to feel my feet and my roots. So at the root, I am standing in my willingness to respond. Now, what that means is that I am in myself, I feel myself, I'm present in myself, and I'm also willing to connect. So I'm not walled off, I'm not retreating, I'm here in the fullness of me, inviting the fullness of you to interact and connect so that we can respond to each other. So when I am taking responsibility, when I am willing to respond, then what follows is my willingness to trust my impulses, to trust what I want to say and what I want to do. And I build a track record with myself of making and keeping agreements with me. In fact, really the only times I've gotten into really sort of significant trouble in my life is when I have overridden that radical self-trust. When I just, I had that in the root, I had this, oh yeah, and I said, oh, but, it almost always comes from hero. It's, oh, but, it's sort of, oh, poor them, oh. And that's when I've gotten into trouble. And I imagine that some of you will be able to relate to that. So here are a couple things I want to just throw out about responsibility. We talked and have talked for a couple of decades about the one pie theory of responsibility. So I grew up in a family of 5, 3 kids, 2 parents. So dividing up a pie was always a problem because there were 5 of us. So, dividing it and making sure everybody got an equal part. So that was always a place where there was a lot of sibling knives and forks out. Who was going to get the piece of pie, the piece of cake, and yours is bigger. And so most people think of responsibility that way, as one pie. And we'll hear people saying, well, I've taken responsibility for my part, but what about you? Or I'm willing to take responsibility, but I'm waiting for you. So there's a sense of that responsibility is just 100%. And I've done my part. And so that keeps everything stuck. That's a particular kind of reactivity. So I'd like you to consider that you are a whole pie. And everybody that you interact with is a whole pie. And that each of you is responsible for creating. But this ties us into another aspect of responsibility that we've figured out over the years, is that responsibility only starts when you take it. So before then, you are not responsible. You're kind of like behind the 8 ball. So if you have not taken responsibility, you are at the effect of whatever the strongest energy is, whether that's somebody being angry or somebody really being scared or somebody having leverage over you. You're not at home in your own power when you've divided the pie. So when Gay and I first started taking conscious loving on the road and we started talking about responsibility, this responsibility and the microscopic truth were always the ones where people would get the most, what do you mean? That couldn't possibly be true. That responsibility allows you to co-create. So it allows both of you to be on the field and on the team. So if you were like football is very popular in, I prefer soccer though, I'm going to use soccer instead. So if you're watching soccer, which a whole lot of people are doing now because they can't be in the stands, so they're watching it virtually. It's what are the benefits of being in the stands? Well, one is you get to have lots of opinions. And you get to air your opinions to other people who have their opinions. And that's a major form of entertainment. I think that's one of the reasons that people wanted to get sports back in action as soon as possible, so that people would have something, a way to air their opinions that would create the least amount of public disarray. But when you're on the field, as you know, it's very different. And when you're in the game, things move very, very differently than they do when you're not connected to the game. So when you're taking 100% responsibility, and by the way, that's not like a point on the meter that you can go, okay, I arrived, I've landed there. It really, 100% responsibility for me for years, it would really be, well, how can I respond fully to what's going on here, which I translated into how am I creating or allowing or ignoring what's going on out there, and bringing it back to the wondering, oh, wow, how am I contributing to this? So what I love when I finally got it is that responsibility, the biggest benefit is that you reclaim your creativity. Because when you are not responsible, everybody else is creating and you're reacting. And that's a lot of what we've been seeing, particularly in this last 4 or 5 years in our country. I know some of you are not from this country, and I hope you're taking a good lesson from what we've been sharing with you over the last 4 or 5 years. When I say, okay, I'm going to wonder about how I'm creating this, I've reclaimed the source of vitality, which is my own creativity. And I can just acknowledge, oh, that's how I've been using my creativity. Well, wow, I really didn't understand that before. And now I'm going to use my creativity differently. So looking at the whole idea of looking at the result to let you know how you've been using your responsibility, that's a very cool move. That is a move that allows you to get more and more creative. So some of the misuses of responsibility are, again, burden. I'll just take it on. I must, I'll figure it out. I'll stay late. Don't worry about me. You guys go ahead. So that's a very common one, the hero. And then the villain is, I'll find out who's responsible for this, and we'll punish them. So the punishment, and the hero victim villain phase, that never goes anywhere. And in our in-person seminars, we have videos of some of our people discovering that they just keep going round and round and round. So that hassle that you wrote down earlier, I'd like you to see how are you taking more than 100% responsibility or less than 100% responsibility, or sometimes, depending on with different people, you could be doing both. But the question about how can I take 100% responsibility here? What that will translate for you into is that life will present you with your next learning about responsibility. So it's not a place you arrive, like I take 100% responsibility, I am a rock. But it will give you, like, what's the next thing for me to learn about being able to be genuinely responsive to life, to be in the currents, to be able to catch the wave, to be able to see what's coming before it lands on my head. Because one of the things that we've noticed, we say that life will first, if you have a lesson to learn, life will first tickle you with a feather. But if you don't get the lesson from that, that life has no qualms about just backing up the dump truck in your front yard and just, and I'm sure you, as well as I, have had experiences of the big dump truck. And I decided that I wanted to do things differently. And so that's the journey that I've been on. And it's really been the most exciting of any of the discoveries that I've made, is reclaiming creativity by wondering about the connection. See, when I'm not taking responsibility and you're not taking responsibility, we're not connected. I'm not connected to my whole brain. I'm not connected to my whole body thinking. I'm not connected to others, and I'm not connected to the planet. So being willing to step into responsibility is one of the most powerful steps that we can take to not only heal, that is to make whole ourselves, but to heal our interactions with others and ultimately our interaction with the planet. Because, 1 billion masks now, let's see that. Yeah. So if just decide right now if you'd like to have humans continue being on the planet. I'd like to. I've grown less attached to it than I used to be. I used to just be, frantic, like, people, can't you see? I'd go into superhero mode and try to get people to and I would stand behind people and give them looks when they were using plastic and, 14 plastic bags at the grocery store. I've pretty much been able to release that in favor of, okay, how can I model and generate and ripple out the joy of taking responsibility? So I want to just reiterate again that responsibility does not start until you take it. Because sometimes people will say to us, well, what about, people who, had these terrible pasts and people who were abused, were they responsible for that? To which we respond, no. So responsibility doesn't start until you take it. And then when you say, okay, I am going to start being responsible for my life, then you start getting the opportunity to grow your synapses and to be more connected. This would be a great time. I'm seeing Dean doing some love scoops. This would be a great time. There's a lot of content coming at you. So add in some breathing, add in some love scoops. You can even run around, depending on how much you're wanting to move. Looking at my notes here. People think when they take responsibility, they will have fewer choices. I challenge you to experiment, because I have found that when I take responsibility, I create more freedom and more choice. Because one, I have more of a panorama. I'm not just tunnel vision into you did and I didn't and blame and burden. I'm going, what else might be going on? Which is another great wonder question. What else might be going on? And then you can create wonder moves for your body, because most of us think, we get your head way out in front and furrow your brow and kind of hold your breath and think about it. Yeah, and what I notice is that my neck starts to hurt and I'm not breathing and I feel grumpy and I want to get off this call. So whole body wondering involves going from here to here. So here's another great responsibility question. How am I experiencing this issue in my body right now? So with your hassle, go ahead and ask that question. And I like to also kind of do little, fear melters will do that, but you also could point at your body. How am I experiencing this hassle in my body? And you can notice if your blame and burden area is getting lit up, or if your fear area down in your belly is getting lit up, or your sadness area, or it could be, just all kinds of little sensations. But what you're doing is connecting. You're connecting to your whole body wisdom. And I guarantee you that your body will respond. So you'll get messages if you're letting yourself be open to them. You'll start getting messages from, overhearing something when you're walking through the grocery store, or having something pop up on television, or hearing a neighbor walking by. I've been out riding my bicycle and have overheard conversations where I go, So you never know where the weaving is going to continue. But responsibility, at the core, responsibility is your ability to actually respond and create in life. And it comes out of the same toothpaste tube as your creativity. So as you're opening up to responsibility, here's one of the things I noticed that, when I started getting really excited about responsibility, well, then one of the things that life next presented to me was, well, how about taking responsibility then for making your own living? how about taking responsibility for generating enough income for you and your son? But wait, my ex-husband, he owes me all this money and he never paid me, and I'm going to take him to court, and I'm going to. So I went into blame and burden in that. And then I thought, I am going to take responsibility. And the big goal I had was to be able to generate enough income to afford insurance. So you can probably relate to this, but this was like, 30, 40 years ago, to be able to generate enough money that I could pay for my own insurance. So to create safety. And I fired my son's father from any further responsibility to pay me any money at all. And it was a really big deal, writing out a letter and all of the feelings that I had about that. And then when I sent it off, I experienced this like a fan going whoop and opening this amazing expansion. And the next year, my income doubled. And then the year after that, it doubled again. And that was no longer an issue for me ever, was having enough money to pay for my son and me for insurance or really anything else. So the thing that you see out there that life's presenting, you're going, oh no, not that, anything but that. Well, that's the very thing that's the next portal for you to be able to become more responsive, more creative, more co-creative. So as you're listening to this, you may be getting some little edges of, oh, okay, I got some things to handle here. You might take a moment to write those down, like completing a conversation with someone, or paying back someone for money that you've owed them for, a decade, or incompletions will prevent you from really expanding in your freedom. So I really recommend that you use completions as a way of sort of plugging the leaks in the boat so that you can float on your creativity and not sink with all of the waves that may be coming through. One of the other aspects of responsibility that seems, for some people it seems kind of picky, but I have found it incredibly empowering, is to let go of seeing yourself as a victim. Because if you're not taking responsibility, you can certainly play that particular card and go, oh, it wasn't my fault, and no. But if you have decided to step into creating your life and to be a person of true creative power, you'll be looking at matching your speaking to your experience and letting go of any have-tos and shoulds, particularly. Like, I have to go to the dentist. Well, that's victim speak. And I found by just changing that, I'm choosing to go to the dentist. When I actually use that, I'm choosing to take care of myself. I'm taking care of my teeth. And then when I take care of my teeth, that's going to take care of my whole body, and I feel better and I'm more creative. So I feel good when I'm choosing to go to the dentist. Or I have to take this call. And the other one that really shows up too is real quick now, I know you're busy. So assuming that other people are victims. So letting go of victim speak yourself. But when people say to me, I know you're busy, I'll sometimes reply, well, how do you know that? I mean, what clues are you getting that I'm busy? Because I don't live in that world. So there's this wonderful Viktor Frankl quote that I'm sure some of you know. It's going to be in our newsletter tomorrow, as well as the recording of this. There's between stimulus and response, there is a space. And in that space is our possibility of responding with freedom. So most people leave no space, both in their thinking, in their speaking, and in their acting. So I'd like you to just notice as you're breathing, are you feeling the space of your breathing? What's the rhythm that you're experiencing right now? In fact, just go ahead and embody or bodify your rhythm right now. So some of you might be, and some of you might be, so just go ahead and embody it, because I'd like you to be getting curious about, are there spaces? Are there pauses? Are you feeling both the in-breath and the out-breath? Because if there's no space, if you aren't creating space and perceiving space, there's no possibility of responding. So as you create space, both through your own attention to yourself, your breathing, you're moving through the world in what we call essence pace, those all enhance your ability to respond. So I move at a pace now where I notice things. And if I go from one end of the house to the other without noticing something, I know that I'm not moving responsively. And when I do, I can catch things, and my intuition comes in more clearly when I am moving with pauses. So I want to recommend above everything that you listen and connect with the rhythm of your moving through the world that allows you to experience space. The space of not having to interrupt somebody or talk over somebody or get your point in. The space of receiving and being impacted by what you're experiencing and letting that rearrange you and inform your response. Because I think the basic sickness of our time is speediness. That there's no connection in all of that static. So if you could move at just the most delicious timing for yourself right now, just go ahead and do that for a moment. You can move where you're sitting, or you could move around the room. The most delicious pace that allows you to respond to you and to respond to what's around you. Good, and I see that up in the chat is going up essence pace. Thank you for putting in. That's another resource for you all. So as I said, I could go on about this, but I think I'm going to pause now and see if there are questions or comments, because we have a few minutes left.
Yeah, we have a question here from Monica.
Okay.
What if there are too many choices you perceive in that space? How do you make essence choices and responses?
Okay, beautiful. So I want to first draw your attention, Monica, to what if, because that phrase, if that's a common phrase for you, what if means you have fleed forward. So you may not be aware of fear in that moment, but you have left the present. So what if cannot be answered because you're not there. And when I am opening to different possibilities, there may be just a whole bunch of them, which just reminded me that on our Foundation for Conscious Living website, on our responsibility page, there's this great activity by Jody Kaler. I think it's called Step on It. And that would be a direct response, Monica, to your question in a practical way, because there's a wonderful body intelligence exercise that will help you sort the choices. But I'd also like you to just entertain the choices. Like I could do this, or I could do this, or I could do this, as a vase of flowers, rather than, an Occam's razor.
Plus, one way to use it.
Yes, thank you. Let me just grab, I'm going to go grab a deck. I'll be right back. Oh, actually, I don't need to do that. Pull a card out of yours.
Okay.
Yeah. So in there are a bunch of cards on responsibility. And what does that say?
It says, I'm willing to give drops of love anywhere I need or want them. Add drops of love.
Yeah, beautiful. So that would be, so you can pull out a card and let yourself look at the image and wonder about what you could learn from that. And you could look at the statements and the questions that are on the other side and use those, like you could apply that. So what about your hassle is wanting some drops of love?
Mm.
So that's one way to use it. But I also wanted to let you know, which is also coming out in the newsletter tomorrow, that I've been making videos of the Integrity Deck videos, and they are on, and I have all of the responsibility videos made, and they are up on the Foundation for Conscious Living site. And those will support you in exploring the cards. So all of the concepts that we've talked about tonight are amplified more in each one of the videos, taking different aspects of what we've been talking about and giving you a chance to practice them. So thank you for asking about that, because I forgot that I was going to show you how to use those. But fortunately, we have a resource for that you can use. Thanks, Elizabeth.
Wonderful, I will.
And Katie, we have a couple of questions. Abby just asked, what if taking 100% responsibility then exempts the other person from taking responsibility? For example,
right, that's still the one pie, and that's sort of the heart of the one pie issue. This is where co-commitment is very useful. When I say I'm willing to take responsibility for creating what I really want with this issue, and the other person says, I'm willing to take 100% responsibility in co-creating what I really want with this issue, then you have a playing field where something new can happen, where by actually tossing, by sharing what you're feeling, by sharing what you really want, you begin to move out of the drama of the seesaw of only one person can be responsible. That we can actually co-create. And this is, I think, the huge human skill that we're needing to learn for not only our survival, but our thriving as a species, and for connecting with all of the other living creatures on the planet who are co-creating with us.
Wonderful. Do you want to take one more question?
Sure.
Or yeah.
Sure.
Okay.
Sure.
So Darlene said, how do I take responsibility around someone continually speaking from victim? I presence their experience and loop with myself, and then I feel depleted eventually.
Well, the first question I would ask is, what are you doing coming back to the same place again where you keep getting the same response? This is what Gay calls trying to get oranges from a Birkenstock store. So if you, I actually only want to have people in my life who are willing to step into responsibility. So it's sometimes what we call hanging up the phone. If you call, if your sister calls and goes, we've actually had people go, well, she's my sister. What can I do? So, and to which we say you could, back in the time where you actually hung phones up, I know that's antiquated for most of you, because now you can see who's calling you. But back in my day, we couldn't tell. We'd pick up the phone and it was, oh no, yeah. So another thing that you might do on a more somber tone is to share what kind of relationship you want, that you want to have a relationship with equals and people who are co-creating with you, and that you're committed to ending your own, victim stance in the world. And are they willing to do that too? And if they're not, you can say, yeah. Yeah, so this, what you'll find is that the lessons, even though they may be, have feelings and do new choices and transitions and big upheavals, that ultimately you will be a co-creator in your own life with life, and you'll be a source of creativity for other people, because where you show up, people will feel the possibility. You'll be a beacon of co-creativity and of, we can do this. We can step into this, and we can create solutions that actually work rather than recycling. And that's what I'm really interested in. And I'm so delighted to have your company, and would love to have you begin to apply this in your life in a way that's friendly, so that you can make use of this new year and moving into what you really want to generate and what you want to celebrate. So I'm seeing faces that I know and love, and new faces that I can appreciate. And so how about we just take a minute where you can unmute yourself and make noises at each other and say hello, and we'll have this recording up so that you'll be able to review it if you like. So thank you all. Mwah.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank
Katie.
you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Katie.
Thank you, Katie.
Thank you.
Powerful hour. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hour of power.
Oh.
Love you.
All right, bye now.
Bye.
Thank you.